Zainab and I started this podcast because we saw there was a lack in information within the Muslim community. We saw a lack within a lot of issues. And one of the most confusing issues today is the elections.
Hmm. Exactly. I think that, when we look at the Muslim community and the types of things that we're facing in today's day and age, from Islamophobia that's just exacerbated due to the current climate, the changes that have taken place due to COVID,
Mhm.
and now the fear that's being perpetrated by the elections.
Mhm.
I feel that it's time to have a safe space for Muslims to be able to talk about these issues, and this is how the Muslim journalist was born. So Fatima, I'm really excited to be talking about the elections because I think that a lot of us find ourselves confused. Who to vote for? Is this it? Is this the end of our democracy? Why are we pressured to vote for only two evils, right? And
And we'll
so
talk
we
about that soon, the lesser of two evils in that concept.
exactly. So are we looking at a dystopian future?
Mhm.
And is like something you said earlier got me thinking about how fear is reigning everyone,
Mhm.
right? Like we are fearing, oh, the virus, fearing what could happen if Trump comes back. The a lot of people are fearing us as women covered in veils.
Yeah.
So can you talk a bit about, you know, that and why it's led to the start of our podcast?
When we speak about fear, we always used to mention fear within the media. They're fear mongering, they're pulling in people by making them scared and making them stay in their homes.
Hmm.
But now that fear is literally right outside our houses, when we put on our masks and we walk outside, it's fear for our children, it's fear for our futures, it's fear for our countries. And that has expanded, I think, over time into I think during the elections, the candidates are playing off of that fear that's
Hmm.
already instilled in people. People have been isolated for a long time.
Exactly.
And it's something that gets people, I think it's hard to sit with yourself,
Mm.
especially in this day and age when you have social media right at your fingertips.
Hmm.
It's very hard for a person to just sit at home and start thinking and
Hmm.
really thinking. And
Hmm.
I think that's what made us want to start this, because we
Exactly.
started thinking.
Hmm.
And also, I think it's what's making people scared of what's coming next.
Hmm.
The constant worry of the future of, the United States of America.
Hmm.
And the US is not something to play with,
Exactly.
because what happens in this election is going to be what affects things in the future, not just in the United States. You're not just affecting yourself as a society, you're affecting the whole world.
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
global change that's happening.
Exactly.
And we're here to discuss whether that global change will be better if you look at Trump
Hmm.
versus looking at Biden. Like, who is going to be the better leader? And I don't think there's really a clear answer for that.
Yeah. And I think that attests to a lot of Muslims' confusion
Yeah.
as to, who to go with. And I think, today's conversation firstly is going to help both of us who
Mhm.
have yet to still vote. I'm going to be voting tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I'm
I mean, we
hoping
have yet
that,
decide yet to decide who to vote for. I mean, it's a
yeah,
very hard thing, and that's what
it is
where a lot of
hard.
people are falling.
And I think they're like, and it's okay that it's hard. And I think that's what we're here for, is that,
Mm.
as both of us as journalists, our main goal is to give people informed choices,
Yeah.
information so that they can make the best decisions about their life. And I don't think that anyone can pressure anyone to be one way or another, because like you said, our actions, in turn are going to affect a lot of the world,
Yeah.
a lot
It's a
of
ripple
America.
effect.
Yeah.
Mhm. I
So
wanted to ask you, so what are as Muslims, what are the values that we need to find within the ideal candidate? Like, I know there's no ideal candidate right now, but who is the
mhm.
ideal candidate?
Well, personally for me, I think that, as we're navigating into a more dystopian future, it's giving rise to the idea that we do need a just leader.
Mm,
And both of us staunchly believe in Imam al Mahdi,
mm,
the most just, the most Just thinking about it makes me tear up, because this is something that everyone is now looking for. The eyes
Yeah.
are searching for a just leader, someone who will come and fix everything. We don't have that. We don't have that in any part of our society. And as you can see, like, morality is disintegrating. People's horrid behaviors are coming out, and
Mhm.
that's something I really sat with myself and thought that, Trump didn't change anything. He just exposed everything.
Yeah.
Things that already existed, he just brought to the surface.
Hmm.
And sometimes that could be a blessing, because only when you realize the problems, you realize what it takes to fix it. And the question I guess we want to explore today is Biden that solution? Or
Is
is there a greater solution in sight that we need to be talking about?
and I think part of that question goes to like, is Biden being elected because of fear of Trump, or is he being elected because he really is the leader that America is waiting for?
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of us do have an answer to that, but it's like, if you don't vote, it's this pressure, it's this moral dilemma that people have now. Like, if you don't vote, then you're putting us through another 4 years of Trump.
Hmm. Hmm.
But is that really
Exactly.
doing us any good?
I think I really liked something that I read earlier today. It said, it was a Muslim man who said that voting for Biden is like eating that piece of ham that it's only permissible in Islam in cases of extreme hunger and when you're about to die. And then Trump is starvation and death.
Mm,
So it's like, that's literally how people, especially Muslims, are seeing this election.
yeah,
Is like ham or starvation, pretty
like
much.
haram or dying,
Exactly, haram or dying. Exactly.
basically.
So that's our predicament. We're in a pretty big predicament, and the amazing thing is, even though Muslims make 1% of the American population, we're very essential in swing states.
Hmm.
We could swing this whole election,
Oh yeah.
and so let's talk a bit about that. Where are we at? Where are we at currently?
So, I mean, right now we have over 75 million Americans who have already voted.
Mm-hmm.
And over a third of them are actually in Montana.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Montana is known to be a Republican state based on the previous elections, but we have also Washington State, Colorado, and Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of Muslims, if we vote as Muslims and come together as a community, we can make a huge difference in these swing states that you were mentioning, which are
Exactly.
Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. And also in key areas like Ohio, I
Mhm.
think Virginia, Ohio. These are
Oh, yeah.
Michigan. I mean, Hillary Clinton, Trump got less than 11,000 more votes than Clinton
Even
did.
though Trump really loves Michigan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So, and that's what makes a difference, is that our vote really does count.
Yeah.
But how much does it count?
Mm.
That's the question we want to ask.
What do you think? What's your opinion?
Well, so my opinion, what I don't like is being pressured into voting for just one side over the other. For example, as Muslims, a lot of the third party candidates represent a lot of our ideals, right? From foreign policy, no more wars. I think not just Muslims, but everyone is sick and tired of all these wars, imperialism. We don't
All the
want any
death
more
around the
bloodshed.
world. Mm.
Exactly. We don't want any more of that. And when you look at Biden and Trump's foreign policy stances, and that's something that wasn't discussed very adequately in the debates, which
Mm.
when it's such a big issue, right? And a lot of people don't want to focus on that. They want to be like, well, domestically, we have this problem and this problem. But foreign policy greatly affects that, because the budget that they're, for example, giving to Israel, or the arms deal in Saudi,
Mhm.
perpetrating the military industrial complex, it's all coming out of the budgets that should be helping our people at home. So that it's greatly intertwined.
Mhm.
But that's something that nobody brought up. Can
But
we
the bigger
vote?
question, yeah, I was just gonna ask, the bigger question is, can we vote third party?
Hmm.
Will that make a big difference? And I think that's the dilemma we fall into, is that we have these two parties that are put in the mainstream media, and you think you only have these two choices.
Hmm.
And you think that if you do, okay, I'm just one person voting third party, what's that going to change?
Well, I know that, a lot of people in California, for example, are voting third party because they think that their vote really doesn't count. But
Yeah.
I'm from Florida, so I know that like a third party vote might or pretty much will contribute like to a vote for Trump, if that makes sense. Because Florida is more Republican,
Yeah.
Minnesota is more Democratic. So it's the same way in swing states. Your vote, I think, really does count. So at the end of the day, we need to be thinking that, do we want to be pressured by, I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not saying do one way or another, because right now, like in the past, I would have been like, yeah, for sure, third party, Green Party.
Mm,
Green Party is something that I feel like relates the most to my views.
yeah.
But this time, I'm honestly like, I am thinking about a lot of things because,
Yeah.
as you said, we as Muslims have to also worry about what's going to do the least amount of damage to
Mm,
our society. Um, I remember in Florida, in Altamont, I used to live in a very pro-Trump neighborhood.
mm.
And shortly after the elections, I found myself hurrying my three children into the closet because
Wow.
there was a crazy man waving a gun outside my home and pelting rocks on the glass of my front door. And
So an
there
outright
there's
attack.
there's real fear. There's real
Yeah.
fear
And this
domestically
was after the elections.
after the elections when
Wow.
his people, I guess, got emboldened.
Mm.
And Islamophobia, that's the question: is it going to perpetrate with Trump? So can we hear some of your like back and forth scenarios as to like Trump's Islamophobia is exposing a lot of things and making people want to um, stand against him. So, for
Mm.
example, you have organizations like the NBA who are
Mhm.
making an active stance where they otherwise wouldn't have with Biden or with Obama, because the
Yeah.
Democratic parties they don't really work through these problems; they just stifle
Mm.
them. So I don't know. It's a hard decision, but how much is too much? Like, okay, that's great. If he's exposing everything and he's making everyone take a stance, that's fine. But what if he starts a huge war with Iran? Like,
So this is the question here, and this is where I think I have a problem with everything, is that Trump does everything openly.
mm-hmm,
Other presidents, as we've seen in the past, will sweep things under the rug.
mm-hmm,
Trump, I think what he did was, um, as you just mentioned right now with his racist rhetoric, what he did was make America really face I think, all the rotten things that are happening within it.
mm-hmm.
And that's something that makes me wonder, is it better to have someone who is outright and you know where he stands? Or is it better to have someone who is like playing the lines?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, because Biden definitely plays the lines.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, before we, talk about
Hmm.
Biden's stances, I think we have to highlight his hypocrisy.
Yeah.
He's some people can argue, oh, people change. There are things that he's done in the past for political clout, for because he was part of other admins and he had to do that, but it's going to be much different. And I think a lot of people have fooled themselves into thinking that things are gonna change
Mm.
overnight when Biden becomes president, because Trump was so horrible. And Trump was horrible on one side, but we have to give him credit for the economy as well.
Oh, yeah.
So we can talk about that
I
later,
think
but
what derailed, really, sorry, just on that
go
point,
ahead.
what really derailed the economy during the Trump presidency was COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And because it really did create new jobs, and really, I mean, we have to give him credit for that.
Exactly.
We're speaking impartially about this.
Yeah.
So,
No, a
um,
lot of people have come up to me and said, Zainab, Trump was really good for our business.
Oh
Trump was
yeah.
good for this. Trump was good for. So things are going really well for a
Hmm.
lot of people until COVID came, and
And
that
that's why he
changed a
was
lot.
voted in the first place, because he's a businessman, because people believe that he can pull up the economy.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Biden, I mean, this guy voted for the Iraq war in
Mm.
2003. And then he calls it a simple mistake, like, oops, like in 2007. I mean,
Oops,
this
I
is
didn't.
millions of lives,
Mm.
right? He can't just say it's a mistake. He has a history of cutting Social Security, and he says that like he's not going to do that.
Yeah.
He's saying that he will protect Social Security, and then he also says that he never tried to cut it. And there's a lot of things that he said that like contradict what he's saying he stands for now. Um,
Even him trying to like appeal to the African American communities. I
mhm,
mean, in the past, he has helped in writing large portions of the crime bill, which
mhm.
strongly contributed to oppression of African Americans. Um,
I have a
in
quote here that he said to Biden said to DJ Charlemagne
Mhm.
on the radio station. And he said, if you have a problem figuring out whether you're for me or for Trump, then you ain't black. Like who says stuff like that? He said so many things that make you wonder, like, does he even care about this community? Um, he was the principal author of the 1994 Violent Crime and Law Enforcement Act,
Mhm.
where it's like it's very harsh. 3 strikes, you're out. Billions of dollars towards prison, death penalty offenses, and barring inmates from getting a college degree.
Mhm.
Bill Clinton said that his stances were very harsh,
Mhm.
but he never he's always like defended his stances.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes me wonder like what kind of president he'll be
And you know
going
that
forward.
Trump, during his presidency, his first step act in 2018 was to change the prisoning sentence laws, which released more than 3,100 inmates who were
Interesting.
actually innocent.
I didn't know that.
Um, so it's kind of this thing where you have,
So has the media just trumped up Trump to a point where he's like this evil guy when Biden could be the greater evil? Let's just play devil's advocate. Like, what
yeah.
if Biden is the greater evil? Yeah, man.
I mean, what, I
I mean,
think
let's
voting for
talk about
Biden,
Biden's stance with like Israel, and I mean,
he's
this is a
completely
big.
pro-Israel, and
He's a
he said
Zionist,
himself that he's a Zionist.
exactly.
Like he
So,
said that about himself.
but then people could argue that Palestine, Palestinians, everyone outside of America is not American, and so our domestic issues have a higher priority than what happens in the Middle East, for example. But then we're kind of torn because as Muslims,
The
the Holy
decisions we're
Prophet.
making in this country are affecting these people who live outside of the world. Even if we want to neglect the fact that, you know, there's a relation, you
Mhm.
can't neglect the fact that this has a direct impact on how they're living their everyday lives. And I think as Muslims, we need to care about these people.
Yeah, I think that, the Holy Prophet has taught us that the Muslim Ummah is like one body, right? When one part of our body hurts, the whole part should hurt. And this idea of individualism, as you said, like living in the West, it's kind of made us desensitized to the problems all around us. Like, I don't think we can even imagine what it's like to have a bomb fall, not just on our neighborhood, but like even our country. It happened once and everything changed since 9/11.
Mhm.
And we see people in Yemen and Syria, they're going through this every single day. People in Lebanon have drones flying over their heads. People in Iran are sanctioned. I don't know how they're affording food and medicine, especially in this time of the pandemic. So when we look at all these issues plaguing our Muslim Ummah, it should hurt us. And we
Of
can't just
course.
say, it's just stuff here in the West that matters. We just
Mhm.
have to look at our own family first. That is our family. These are all our family. These are our
Of course.
siblings. Um, one thing that I did want to mention about Biden was the watch list program. And a lot of Muslims have, shown their disdain for the watch list program, and they've brought it to the attention of the Biden campaign. He's made promises to end the watch list campaign. But I don't know how true that is. I mean, this watch list system was introduced by Bush, but it was actually applied extensively during Obama.
Mm.
So are they really two sides of the same coin? That's the thing that we need to ask. I can't get behind Trump, and I can't get behind the
Biden.
person who was the right-hand man for Obama, who was supposedly our hope, right? When we see him as a Black American president, we're like, wow, he's finally going to get it. But it's the system. The entire system is
It's
corrupt
a system that
from
needs.
within. It's whether he wants to or not, it's the system that's not going to allow him. So
I
that's
have a
what makes me
quote here.
think. Yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. From the Daily Princetonian, which says the electoral system has long been broken. And while voting for the lesser of two evils is a necessary act in this election, of
Mhm.
greater importance is the need to rethink and reshape the societal structures that force us to make such an offensive decision in the first place.
Exactly. So if Trump, for example, is the president, is society finally is the system that's so corrupt finally going to collapse, so
Mm.
that there is room for more other parties that actually represent, most of our interests.
But then you run the risk of creating more Trumps around the world, more Trumps
Exactly.
around America, more violence. Even though Trump didn't start any wars during his presidency, he started, I think, economic wars,
Hmm.
just like you said, the sanctions on Iran,
What is
breaking
the
the
what
Iran
is
treaty.
Can you tell me a little more about, the lesser of the two evils? Why is this word thrown around so much, this sentence?
So, lesser of two evils actually originates from ancient Greek,
Hmm.
and it was used in the Odyssey,
Hmm.
where
Interesting,
two of the
really.
gods were actually, yeah, they were choosing one of the lesser of the two evils. It's a proverb, and it's a strategy of desperation, and that's what we're in right now. But determining the lesser of two evils, we need to define that first. What does it mean? It is, according to dictionary.com, it is the somewhat less unpleasant of two poor choices.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you define it that way, it makes sense why this
Yeah.
term is being thrown around. When you say evil, some people don't believe that Biden is evil. They believe Trump is evil. Um, Even though Biden and Trump have both been accused of sexual assault, you
Hmm.
know, they are both have shown a lot of support for Israel. They both, like, there's a lot of similarities between the two that you can't take them apart from each other.
Hmm.
And then it makes you think, is this just what, any American president is going to do,
Hmm.
based on the track record of the past, right?
I mean, you
I
said
have,
something about, Trump hasn't started any wars,
mhm,
but he started economic wars.
yeah,
When we talk about that, he's placed over 800 sanctions on Iran.
yeah.
And when we think about that, I don't even know how they're surviving at this point.
Even just looking at how he broke the nuclear treaty with Iran, like that was a big deal in the Obama presidency. That
Hmm.
was after like 8 years of,
Negotiations.
yeah,
Hmm.
that was something that was a true, I think, step that it's like one of the only steps that Obama took that was really made a difference,
Hmm.
and
Even the
to,
even the sanctions on Lebanon,
mhm,
the Trump has placed sanctions on Lebanon, on
yeah,
Syria, on Yemen, obviously backing the Saudi regime in Yemen.
mm,
But then again, he's seen as less hawkish than Bush and Cheney.
mm.
But then we have to ask, is he going to definitely start a war with Iran? Why didn't he do that during this presidency? What's stopping
Mhm.
him from doing that? Is Biden going to continue this kind of like a war type of scenario undercover, or and is Trump just going to do it more openly, or are they two different beings completely?
And that's where we fall in the confusion again.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to put Biden and Trump next to one another and really see, in terms of policies,
Mm-hmm.
nothing really will change. And you know what? I think Trump had the racist rhetoric, but Biden will incorporate that into the law,
Mm,
based on
exactly.
his past record of what he's done in the past.
Mm-hmm. What has he done in the past, Biden?
Well, you know what he actually said? He moved bills and amendments that achieved or tried to achieve the following, which eliminate parole, enforce mandatory and longer sentences, allow evidence illegally acquired to be used in court, making it harder to plead insanity, restrict the right to appeal, lower the age at which children can be tried as adults, and allow police to seize the assets of people who haven't been charged, and drug test school kids. And
Mm-hmm.
these things, if you really look at these issues that are being covered, these affect minorities.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Most of these issues affect the minorities.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do people do in this case? Some people will just say, you know what, it's too hard, I'm not going to vote.
A lot of people are abstaining, and I
Mm-hmm.
respect that. Like no one can tell you, oh, you have to vote, or like if you really thought about things and you believe abstaining is the right path, then good on you. If you've really thought about it and you think Biden's the right path, good on you. I can't say anything about Trump's past, but um or third party, good on you. Like as long as you're making informed choices, that's all I care about. Like at this point, I don't think that anybody should be forced or coerced to go a certain way due to pressure. But how are we then different from sheep? How is then this a real democracy?
I actually read a quote that I found interesting, and I wrote it down before this. It says here, Alex Cook of Red Brick
Mm-hmm.
mentions, when it comes to the 2020 US election, voting is like public transport. You take the route that is heading in the right direction, even if it does not reach exactly where you want to be.
Hmm. So what's
You
the
know,
right direction then?
that's what we're asking ourselves. Is the right direction going towards the godlessness, liberalism, or is the right direction going towards
Proto-fascism,
exactly?
pretty much. Corporate capitalism or xenophobia and intolerance.
So we have a capitalist Democrat and a proto-fascist. Like,
Proto-fascist, yeah. Yeah.
okay,
And I what I want to know is, what is it going to look like for the Muslim community? Can we
mhm,
talk about that? Can we
yeah.
talk about, like, let's say Trump is reelected. Can we make some projections just for the fun of it?
I mean, we can say that the past 4 years, people have survived, right?
Well, Trump doesn't care much about COVID.
No.
Trump cares a lot about the economy because he has his own hotels. He has his own businesses that he wants to
That he wants
he
to keep
wants to
running.
see thrive. Yeah.
Yeah.
He evades taxes. And during his presidency, and even now with COVID, we see the rich getting richer. The
Mm.
1% is just on the rise of, you know, wealth gain, massive wealth gain, widening the gap between the 1% and the 99%. So we're
Mm.
seeing a lot more inequality
But
in that
with
sense.
Trump, we have a clear black and white.
Mm-hmm.
With any other candidate, you have that gray area again where you think, oh yeah, they're doing something good. They're trying, they're doing their best. But
Mm-hmm.
with Trump, you can be against him fully and you can challenge it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we can bring up the Black Lives Matter movements. We can bring up different, the NBA supporting the Black Lives Matter movement.
And the fact that media is against him, so they challenge him way more than they would
Oh yeah.
challenge Biden.
Hmm.
Some people could argue that there's more accountability for Trump than there is for Biden.
And something I do respect is that Trump writes every single one of his own tweets. It's been
You respect that?
I mean, it's been a long 4 years, and he has written every single one of his tweets. That must be hard to keep up. I mean, that really, you know what he appeals to? He appeals to people wanting someone real.
Yeah.
You know, someone
He's
who is
more
going to show
authentic.
up, who's
Yeah.
going to be authentic, who's going to
Biden says one thing and then he says something crazy the next, and it's
I
like
mean, we
you
can
don't
argue that
know.
Trump says that too,
He
you
says
know,
crazy things, but he kind of sticks to
beliefs.
his beliefs. Like
Mm.
Biden is, he's one
Contradictory.
minute part of the civil rights movement, another he's saying he wasn't part of it. He's,
He's kind of part
he's
of it,
flip
but he's
flopping.
not.
Yeah, he's not, and it's more of
That's
it's
playing
the
the
same
lines.
kind of things we saw with Hillary Clinton. Like you don't know where they really stand. You don't know their true beliefs and their true values. It's like they're just trying to appeal to the people to get the vote, to get
Do you
elected.
think Biden winning can antagonize pro-Trumpers?
So that's one belief. A lot of people are abstaining from voting because they believe that if Trump loses, it's going to mean a lot more damage
Mm.
to America, because we might see a war, we might see civil war, we might see people hurting each other, because what Trump going away is not going to all of a sudden magically erase all these xenophobic,
No,
Islamophobic, you know, black
no,
phobic
it's not.
tendencies.
No.
It's not going to erase that. So what is it going to do? Um, I want to look at Islam a little bit, because you have examples of the Holy Prophet, you have examples of Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, and how they dealt with a lot of situations. So right now, we're looking at those kind of situations where we want to see whether is what's good for us long term or what's good for us short term.
Mhm. Just to give people some context, they were living in societies that were run by tyrants.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And so sometimes the Holy Prophet also made decisions that resulted in the torture and execution of many of his followers in the short term, but look at how greatly it expanded in the long term. Same way with Imam Hussein, he took a stance that was detrimental in the short term,
Hmm.
but look at how many people follow and revere him and keep his message alive today. But then you also have people who made sacrifices and looked at the short term just to stay alive, with Imam Ali just trying to stay alive with his followers, the few followers that he had.
Hmm.
So that's
So
where we
are
are
we in
at
the
right now.
long-term war or the short-term war? That's what you're
That's the
asking.
thing. And I don't think there's a clear answer. Like
Hmm.
no one's going to tell us all, hey, there is a clear
Like,
answer.
are we trying to vote in terms of what's going to be good, the greater good in the long term, or
Mhm.
what's going to do us good right now to keep us surviving? Are we at that point where we are thinking of survival right now?
I think so. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are. I mean, a lot of people are jobless. A lot of people are. COVID's affected so many people around the world,
Mm.
especially the poor and the vulnerable. It's affected them the most. Children who used to, I run a relief organization here in Canada now,
Mhm.
and really feel for the children who come from poor income households, um, who used to get fed at lunch and breakfast at schools. They don't have any of that. They don't have, so many things are affected because of the pandemic. So we have to understand that this is going to be detrimental to people in the future. We have to think about people. And so just segueing from that, when we think about Palestine, which is a very oppressed nation, from the very beginning, the millions have been displaced from An-Nakba. So a lot of American Muslims will argue that what does Palestine have to do with our politics here in the
Mm.
West? So what would you say to
Why should
that?
we care?
And where do the two candidates stand on that? Because, for example, the Green Party candidate Hawkins is very clear on what he wants to do. He's very
Mhm.
pro BDS and he's very pro Palestine. So what are their stances like, and why should American Muslims care?
Well, a couple facts here. Um, as we said, Biden has been quoted saying that he is a Zionist. He supports the creation of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel.
Mm-hmm.
But, there are a couple things that he said. He said that he will not return the U.S. embassy to Tel Aviv. He will reopen a U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem to allow a Palestinian de facto embassy in Washington. And he is very pro-Israel. I mean, some of the things he says, you can say, okay, these are promises, but are they really going to be put into action? And based on his, he says that he doesn't support annexation, and he's going to reverse the Trump administration steps that he thinks undercut the prospects of peace. But do you really believe that he will do that? Do you really think that
No.
he will actually go back and change what Trump has done?
Nope.
And Trump took these actions. Trump, he denied the right of return for Palestinian refugees whose families have been displaced by the Israeli occupation in 1948. He cut all United Nations relief and work agencies, whose role was to actually provide the basic social services to around 5 million Palestinian refugees in Gaza. So we have a lot of things that Trump has actually put into action. I think what we have to look at is, are Biden and Trump really different when it comes to these issues? I don't think they are. Trump poses a threat to Palestine, but so does Biden. So does it really make a difference which one is chosen?
No, not when it
Let's be
comes to
honest,
Palestine.
it doesn't.
I mean,
No.
if Palestine is important to you, then I don't think that either of them are going to be a good choice.
Yeah.
When we look at the scenarios, we've talked about how Biden winning can antagonize pro-Trumpers, bloodshed, fights on the street. Biden winning can also mean war around the world that will keep perpetuating, like we said. A Trump win can mean, I'm just giving all the scenarios, right? Trump win can
Everything
mean
together.
a post-apocalyptic World War III future. I mean, he tried it. What's to say, like, what's there for him to lose in the next presidency? I mean, he has his hotels, so he can lose those. Trump does face more accountability with the press and the establishment, whereas Biden would not. But then again, does Trump even care about accountability? That's the question. With a Trump presidency, things will be more open, and there is a lot more energy to rise up against oppression.
Which is a positive thing.
It is a positive thing. Whereas it's like, when you have a disease and it's like, you've diagnosed it, you can treat it. If it's hidden, like Biden would be like, oh, there's no cure, and it keeps going on forever. And Trump winning could eventually
Possibly.
dismantle the entire corrupt system and be better for the long term, but it could also dismantle the entire world, which we then might not even be able to see a long term.
We just want to bring to light the issues that are really the truth of these politicians,
Exactly.
It's not trying to shed a negative light on either one. It's not trying to shed a positive light on either one. In the future, how we can really cause a change is within our local communities. This election is going to change a lot, but going forward, let's really put in an action plan and start thinking about our local communities, what we can do, who's teaching our kids, who's affecting the education system, who is the person creating, the policies within our state. Every state has their own governor.
I think that's what a lot of us forget, is that we have a lot more power in our local grassroots movement.
Yeah.
That in turn, a lot of people are very reactive. We are very reactive as a society rather than preventative or proactive. And what we see now with like people are like, oh, but why do we have only these two choices? Well, it's because of how we've contributed to our society.
Mm-hmm.
Do people even know who their mayors are, who their board of education directors are? These
Mm-hmm.
people are actually making choices for your children's education, what they're learning in school, that could be completely against your values.
Exactly.
All these things, they're contributing to, helping the homeless. These are things that really can go a long way in the bigger outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And these things, like people are saying, will keep happening, they'll keep happening. Two things that, we want to take away from this is, obviously, as Muslims, we're always filled with a lot of hope.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because one, we believe this life is temporary.
Yeah.
This life is just fleeting. We're passengers, we're just passerbys, and we have a bigger destination to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And second, we know that a better day is coming when,
Inshallah.
towards the end of times, when there's going to be a just leader that everyone will want and call out for, whether it's Muslim, non Muslim, black, white, anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we should keep our hopes up, and it's not the end. Even if things happen, they'll happen the way they're meant to be. Nothing will happen without God's will. As a journalist, and you as well, we are not going to tell people who to vote for. Our role is to provide people with choices. And I want to leave with saying one thing. John Adams, the founder of one of the framers of the Constitution, um, said that a division of the republic into two great parties is to be dreaded as the great political evil. And so now we've found ourselves stuck with the two-party system, to kind of pick one way or the other. And I think it's been clear from everything that we've gone through today that it's not as black and white. We
No,
have
it's
a
not.
lot of things to consider. As long as you can justify your decision, I think that's what's important here.
This conversation has put my heart at ease a little bit because I think we can see the moral compass a little more clearly now.
Hmm.
But I think the thing I want to leave people with is whatever the outcome, no matter your vote, I think at the end of the day, we have to always remember that we do still have an impact
Hmm.
on the society. We still do have an impact on what the next 4 years after these 4 years will look like,
Exactly.
like within the next 4 years, we can change what will happen the four
Hmm.
year following. And I think that's really important to, really hone in on
Hmm.
because it doesn't just stop after this election.
Nope. We
And
can't
this
be
election,
reactive. We can't be
exactly.
people who are just, oh, federal elections. We have to really be proactive. And
Hmm.
if we really envision a future where our values are represented,
Hmm.
why don't we have people
Who look like
who
us
look like us,
actually
who are
going into government.
with our unapologetically with our values? Because isn't that what democracy is about? People have made religion
But
seem
that's
like a
if it's a
terrible
true
evil.
democracy,
Mhm.
you know?
Exactly.
And that really makes you think about, having this authoritarian state
Hmm.
run
Hmm.
in the disguise of a democracy,
Yeah. Yeah.
what decisions do we really make? So that's why we have to come back to our local communities. And I'm going to keep urging
Everyone
and
to.
pushing that because
Yeah.
truly it does make a difference. That
Hmm.
makes the greatest difference. Even if you just start with your neighbor, informing them about who you are.
Hmm.
I think as Muslims, we become, especially as Muslim women within the West,
Yeah.
you're the person that people come and ask questions to.
And a
So I
lot of
think we need
people
to
might
set
think that's
examples.
unfair, but it's the truth. I mean,
Mm.
just as there's been efforts made to tarnish our religion using, the veils, we have to counter that movement with more proactive measures. It
With
falls
our
on
veils.
us, unfortunately. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's not my fault. It's like, I didn't do any of the bad things.
Mhm.
But your generations, your future generations, your family, your sisters, people of your faith are going to be affected
Yeah.
because of Islamophobic measures. I think this has been really helpful for me personally. I thank you
Mhm.
everyone for joining us on our very first video podcast. And we haven't really officially launched yet, but I felt that I and Fatima felt that this was so important to talk about because we just saw confusion everywhere and no real talk about the actual stances, the options. They're just, even on Muslim platforms, there were just questions being asked, but no
Mhm,
real like solution or no real like conversation around it.
mhm.
And I think that it's good to have that safe space for us to be talking about that. Hopefully in the future episodes we can bring in guests and experts when we have a bit more time. This was done like overnight. We had
Overnight
to set
planning.
up the studio overnight. So like hopefully we'll have a lot more time, but I'm excited for this venture. I think it's much needed, and I hope that we see a lot more little journalists, you know, come
And this
forward.
episode was a longer one than most are going to be. So please let us know how long you guys think an episode should be. How we
Mhm.
want your feedback. We want to know what you guys want to listen to. Let us know what issues are important and close to your heart that need more light shed on, that need more information, resources.
Mhm.
We're going to bring any sources that you need on here to speak about the issues that matter to you. And that's really the core of what we're doing. So
Exactly.
anytime, feel free to reach out and let us know.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us. We are the Muslim journalists, and we will see you next time, inshallah.